Hello vinyl community, Bradley here. I am in Studio I, which stands for inside. I was in Studio O, which stands for outside earlier. It was damn hot and humid, and I was wasting way too much time on the video. So I decided to come in here and start it again. This video is an entry into a contest. The contest is sponsored by Norman Maslov, aka Mazzy, for his 600th subscriber. That's what the contest is for. I enjoy watching Mazzy's channel. It's very informative. He has a lot of cool stuff on there and a lot of neat stories. So anyhow, he came up with 6 questions here. So let's get it going here. The first question is, show an album everybody should own. And I'll preface this by saying, if you watch my channel, you'll know I'm into jazz. But the answers on these questions is probably 50-50. So don't tune out if you don't like jazz, because I will get to the rock. Show an album everyone should own. Well, this album, it was one of my gateway albums into jazz. 1959 on Columbia Records. Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. This particular one is a reissue. It's got a couple of alternative takes on this. This album is very mellow. Probably one of the, in my opinion, it may be the best jazz album ever made. I don't know. Now the cast on this is Miles Davis on trumpet, Cannonball Adderley on alto sax, John Coltrane on tenor sax, Bill Evans piano, Jimmy Cobb drums, and Paul Chambers on bass. This is good stuff, and kind of like the story behind this album was Miles was going into the studio, and they didn't have any rehearsals really, and all he had was a few kind of like chord changes, more or less. It's modal music, but a few changes, you know, written down on a piece of paper. And basically he showed it to these other musicians, who they were all fantastic jazz musicians, and basically said, just kind of follow this basic outline and do whatever, make it sound good. Whoa. They made it sound good. And most of these songs on here, there's 5 songs, and I think 3 of them were on the first takes. There's a couple songs there actually exist a second take of this album, of these songs. So if you're not into jazz and want to get into jazz, this is the perfect album. You know, if you don't like this one, I don't know, maybe you won't like jazz. I don't know. Question number 2. Show an album that puts you or someone in a mood. I've got the perfect one. This puts me in a mood. Now this is another jazz album. In 1975 on ECM Records. It is the Cologne concert with Keith Jarrett. Is a double album on ECM Records. Like I said, 1975 it was released. I'll just show you the ECM label. This is a double album. It's probably got 60 minutes of music. It is solo piano, all improvisation. Briefly, very briefly, the story behind this album, it was recorded around midnight on a Saturday night in the Cologne Opera House. And sold out concert, 1,400 people. Well, anyhow, the piano that Keith Jarrett had requested, it was not there. It was not even a grand piano. It was more like a baby grand piano. It was out of tune. The action on the keys was terrible. It was a piece of shit. But they had sold 1,400 tickets, and they had the recording equipment all set up to record this album. So they decided to go through with it. What the hell? Record it. And this album is amazing. It definitely puts you in a mood. Now this is an album, like I said, it's just solo piano, improvised. It's not good for background music. Not really. You would think it would be, but no. This is an album you have to sit down and invest your time and listen to it to get the full idea from this album. If you have headphones, that would be the perfect way. You just have to immerse yourself in this music. Put you in a mood because the album starts out probably 5 or 6 minutes of him more or less, I would say, doodling around. And it's like, whatever, you know, I don't know if I get into this. So either two things might be going on here. Either he's not really sure where he's going, possibility, or the second possibility is he's setting you up for this journey. And actually it's probably a little of both, I believe. This album takes you just through his piano playing, through so many moods. There may be happy moods. He plays happy. Sometimes he'll play sad. I mean, just very sad sounding. Anger. There's moods of anger in here. Almost, I don't know what you call it, fear maybe? I don't know. So he's taking you through a journey with all these moods. And I don't know how he does it, but it's amazing. You just have to invest the time to listen to this. Question number 3. Show an album with a beautiful cover and packaging. Okay, see if we got one here. Okay, now this album, it has beautiful cover art. It doesn't have beautiful packaging. It's just a single sleeve record. It is Dave Brubeck from 1959 on Columbia, as was the Miles Davis album. Time Out. This has Take 5, the jazz song, on there. And this is another gateway record, I think. Take 5, that's probably the first jazz song I ever heard in my life. I was, whatever, 5 or 6 years old. I remember hearing it on the radio. And it was like, I was into my 20s before I knew the name of that song and the artist. So, anyhow, the cover art, kind of a modernistic art, little abstract or whatever. It was done by S. Neil Fujita. He was a Japanese American. He actually, in his early 20s, he spent time in a internment camp during World War II. And then he was allowed to join the U.S. Army, and he went overseas into Italy and France, and their battalion or whatever company was highly decorated. So he got out of the Army after the war, went to school on the GI Bill, and he was a graphic designer. And he did this cover, which I love it. So that's the back of the album, pretty normal. And he also did the album cover for another 1959 jazz release on Columbia, Charles Mingus, which was similar in style to this. Different art, but the same, whatever, postmodern, I don't know what you call it. And actually, Fujita, he also designed the covers for books. If you remember in Cold Blood, Truman Capote's book, that's that cover art, he did that. He did the cover art for the Godfather book. The 3 strings with the puppet and Godfather. He did that. So he was a very talented graphic designer. And that's why Columbia originally hired him, because Blue Note was putting out these really beautiful covers on their jazz albums, which most of those were photographs. So this was kind of like in response. They wanted quality, and they got it. Number 4, show an artist you own their entire catalog or are making progress. I have a couple artists, so I will show you this one. It is The Clash. This would be their first album, simply entitled The Clash. Probably released in, I don't know, 78 or so. So I played this album a lot. It's got a lot of, it's one of the best punk albums, in my opinion, ever made. Maybe the best. A lot of songs on here. Most of them are quick and short. There's 2 reggae songs on here. Police and Thieves, done by, or written by Marvin and Perry. They're reggae artists. And the other one was White Man in Hammersmith Palace, which is probably my favorite Clash song. And written by Strummer and Jones. And actually, this song, I think it could apply to today's political climate. Because back in these days, the UK was going through social upheaval. You had the extreme left, you had the extreme right with the nationalists, and they would have demonstrations and get into fights and all that. Sound familiar? Yeah. Anyhow, it's got a, and White Man in Hammersmith Palace is a fairly simple song. They never repeat any of the verses. They're all of them are different. It's got one line in here, I'll just say, all over, people changing their votes along with their overcoats. If Adolf Hitler flew in today, they'd send a limousine anyway. I'm the all-night drug-prowling wolf who looks so sick in the sun. I'm the white man in the palace, just looking for fun. There we go, a little poetry. That's a excellent album, and that came, at least the early versions came with a 45. So that's cool. And I'll just briefly show you the rest of the Clash records. The second was an EP. Black Market Clash. This is 10-inch EP. It's got 9 songs on here. And this music is pretty much a continuation of that first album. Fairly raw and rough. Excellent EP. This is that's a very good album. Okay, then their third release would be an album called The Clash, Give 'Em Enough Rope. Another excellent album. A lot of really good songs on here. Excellent. Now this one, it's a studio album. Just a little more polished than than those first 2 albums I showed you. Just some of the rough edges were taken off, but it's still pretty good punk music. And my favorite song on here is Stay Free, which that was featured in there was a movie made in the early 80s called Rude Boy, kind of like a fictional documentary, whatever, about the Clash. So, okay, then we get into this album. I consider it the Clash's Sgt. Pepper. It's called Sandinista. This is three records, a 3-record album. Probably got 24 songs, or 36 songs. A lot of reggae on here. This is purely a studio album. Lots and lots of overdubs, different types of instruments. And this album is overlooked. Massively overlooked. It's a fantastic album. A lot of people say, well, they should have made it a 2-album set, cut out the filler. Well, you hear that with the Beatles' White Album too, you know. I disagree. I'm happy they made it into 3 albums and put this music out, because all of the songs are very good and some of them are great. Okay, then we get into probably their most famous album, a double album, London Calling. And I believe that is the bass player, I think, Paul Simonon, smashing his guitar. I always thought it was Strummer or Jones, but I think it's the bass player. Excellent album. What can I say? A lot of people are familiar with this album. One thing on here, it's got Train in Vain, Won't You Stand By Me. Now that is not listed on the back of the album or on the album label. I remember the original hype sticker, they stuck it on at the very end before they actually pressed the record. So they advertised it as a hidden cut. There was a little sticker on the album. It says, contains the hidden cut train in vain. So that's a little info about that album. Now the last album, which actually there was one more Clash album after this one, but it was only like half the Clash or something, and I don't consider that a Clash album. Since it's my video, I can determine my own rules. This is Combat Rock. This has Rock the Casbah, Should I Stay or Should I Go? This is probably my least favorite of these albums I've shown you. But it's good. When I used to be in a band, I would sing Should I Stay or Should I Go? So I didn't have a good voice, but I could make it through that song. And it sounded kick-ass. Okay, we're getting towards the end here. Number 5, show a debut album by an artist or group released in 1969. Now, originally, when I heard his rules for this, or the questions for this video, I thought, boy, I don't know if I can do this video. There's a couple questions that I don't know if I got stuff. But I did sit down the other night, and I came up with stuff. So this is an album that was released in 1969. It's the self-entitled, I guess, Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
Now, our current lineup, minus original members of Blood, Sweat, and Tears, plays at the Bethel Woods on Friday and this weekend.
Excellent album.
As well as Esther Winter, also
it's got a, well, it's got Sweet Judy, Blue Eyes, Marrakesh Express, Guinevere, Wooden Ships, Long Time Gone, 49 Bye-Byes. What can I say? Excellent album. And of course, all those artists were in very popular groups, but it was the first released by Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Get that back into the jacket here. There we go. Okay, last question. Time-wise, not too bad, I guess. Last question. Show your favorite album from 1969. Luckily, I had a couple that was released in 1969. It is Led Zeppelin II. This is a reissue from a couple years ago, remastered by Jimmy Page. My original album, I think I gave it to a friend, whatever. So the story behind this album, it came out in 1969. I probably bought it probably early 70. I was like a freshman in high school. Got my first real turntable or phonograph. And so at this time, I only had probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 albums at the very most. So I would play the crap out of the albums I had. And I would always go by this, pass by this album at in the record store. You know, $3.99. So I was familiar with A Whole Lot of Love. They played that on Top 40 radio, because back then we didn't have the FM rock radio, at least where I lived at. So I was familiar with that song. and always liked the cover. So I bought it and took it home. I listened to it. I was familiar with Whole Lotta Love. The rest of the album, I thought, why the hell did I buy this album? I don't get it. Don't get it. It's crunchy and these guitars going on. So anyhow, the second day, I put it on and listened to it, and a couple songs, Heartbreaker and Livin' Lovin' Maid. Well, that's kind of a neat riff, kind of, but it still sucks. The whole album. Ugh. Well, the third day I put it on, and by the time I got done listening to it the third time, I thought it was probably the best album ever made in the history of records. Which actually, I still kind of stand by that. It's definitely my favorite Zeppelin record, and actually of all records, it's one of my favorites. So it's the history of that. So those are the 6 questions. He did have Mazzy had a bonus question, which I didn't write it down. I'm trying to go by memory. I think it's like name Mazzy's 3 favorite groups. I think that's what the question was. I don't know. So I will say number 1, Jefferson Airplane. I'm going to go with that. I feel comfortable. Number 2, a completely wild guess. I have no idea. But when you have no idea, what group do you say? You say the Beatles. I don't know. He's probably got a couple Beatles albums. I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. Then the third question. Was there a third, or the third album, or third group? I don't know. I have no idea. So that's my entry for Mazzy's 600 subscriber contest. I want to thank you for making it through this rather long video. It's a little longer than I usually make. So thanks for sticking with me, and I hope everybody has a good week and weekend. So until the next time, catch you. See ya.